a couple of years ago, 2 years ago now, the paleontologists brought together a dinosaur that they said looks like a dragon. Now, it took 2 years of the most skillful paleontologists in the world working on this to bring all the fragments together using all the technologies they've got available, and it's improving every year. And the conclusion was that this dinosaur looks like a dragon. And in honour of the Harry Potter series, they gave it the name, as you can see here on the screen, Dracorex hogwartsia. And so, if you go into the museum where it's displayed, it has this, has a number of descriptions there, and it says, when we saw this creature's head, we weren't sure what kind of dinosaur it was. Its spiky horns, bumps, and long muzzle looked more like a dragon. And here's another description. If you go to the museum in the US, what you'll see, it's a new type of dinosaur that looks like a dragon. So could it be that dragons and dinosaurs bear striking similarities because they are simply different names for the same creatures? Well, you see, many of the founding fathers of paleontology, many of the scientists in the 1800s, would have answered with a resounding yes. And so the purpose of this talk is to review how the evidence is overwhelming that the dragons of the past are what we see in scientific textbooks, in history books, in preschool books, as the dinosaurs of the present. And the biggest thing we want to take away from this weekend really is not to trust the wisdom of this world. We need to trust the Bible. As it says here in Psalm 118, verse 8, it is better to trust in Yahweh than to put confidence in man. You know, sometimes we don't have all the answers to what science will throw at us. But the best thing we can do is just stick to what God says. Maybe a solution will come in the future. But don't depart from what God has told us, is what we've got to do. And that's the best strategy we can have for interpreting the Bible. Well, what is it about dinosaurs and man? Did they coexist? Was there a great gap of millions of years between the prehistoric world of dinosaurs and when God created Adam and Eve? I initially must confess that I believe that they were a part of a pre-Adamic creation. And this is how I would explain it to interested friends all my life, that we can't deny the fossil evidence that they existed as creatures. And all I could explain was basically they lived in a creation that God had created, and we don't have any specifics about it. We don't know how long it was ago, but well before Adam and Eve. And it was an awkward explanation, quite frankly. But hopefully, when we consider all the evidence today, you're going to change your mind and realise that we don't need to be awkward in explaining dinosaurs. We can confidently say that God created them as part of his creation, of his six-day creation, as we just read in Genesis chapter 1. I also must say at the outset that I owe this. I'm not a biologist. I'm not a scientist by profession. I'm a financial analyst. So what authority have I got to be talking about this? Well, it's more or less my hobby. The subject first came across my radar back in April 2010 when I received this Bible magazine, which is put out by a group of our brethren and sisters in the US. Some of you may subscribe to this magazine. But in there, one of their feature articles was entitled here, The Bible and the Dinosaur Mystery. So this is when I first came across the views that I'm going to present to you today. At the time, I read it with thorough interest, very sceptical at first, but I just kept on building up a file on the subject and presented it to the Korean brethren and sisters who some of you may know, Priscilla and I, we've been in Korea for the past 20 years and only came back to Sydney 12 months ago. But at the time it was quite exciting. There was no particular evolution versus creation issue going on in our ecclesia. It was just simply an interesting article that I read, that I looked into, I researched, and that made a lot of sense. And ever since, over the past 4 years, I've been building the case for this. And what I present to you today, believe me, it may be a lot of information, but actually it's only a summary of what I've got. And part of the difficulty in preparing these talks was to get it all down. Okay, now, according to modern science and the textbooks, the dinosaurs first appeared 250 million years ago and then died out about 65 million years ago. So when they talk about a dinosaur, they say it is at least, the scientific world and the universities, at least 65 million years old. And another point to remember with their view is that they believe that birds evolved from early dinosaurs, which sounds ludicrous, but that's what they believe. However, as we read in the Bible, it tells us in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 20 to 21 that God created everything that exists, in the waters, in the skies, in the heavens above. Let the birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind, and God saw that it was good. And then on the sixth day, verse 24 and 25, the creation of the animals on the land. Let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things, the beasts of the earth after their kind, and it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind, and God saw that it was good. So on day 5, God created every bird and everything in the sea, and on day 6, God created everything, every beast on the land. And that's important because actually in the Hebrew, we have the word dragon on one of these underlined words, and we'll get onto that in a second. So God is telling us very clearly that he created everything, including dragons, during his 6-day creation. But of course, the evolutionary timeline is that, as we said, dinosaurs first appeared about 250 million years ago, and then they died out about 65 million years ago, and then during this period, birds evolved as well. And so they think all dinosaurs, and including birds, evolved from one small creature about the size of a rabbit, and they've got no proof as to how any intermediary missing gap steps in between as to how it got to that stage. You won't find anything like that. But that's what is presented in the average biology textbook at school. So, now here's something. This is not a creationist, this is a scientist, and this is what he says about the possibility of man and dinosaurs coexisting together. He says, solid evidence that dinosaurs and man coexisted would shake the foundations of evolution. Okay? And here's a comment that you'll find on a typical pro-evolutionary internet blog. Good evidence of humans and dinosaurs coexisting, if it existed, would change scientific theory, but it hasn't been found. Well, we're going to question that today. And here's another one. Such an association, man and dinosaurs together, would dispel an earth with vast antiquity. The entire history of creation, including the day of rest, could be accommodated in the 7 big biblical days of the Genesis myth. Evolution would be vanquished. Noticed this famous scientist, a paleontologist, language referring to Genesis as a myth. It allows us to see where his bias is, doesn't it? He does not hold a biblical worldview. Yet, he understands that if man and dinosaurs walk side by side, then the entire web holding together evolution and their secular worldview would be vanquished. Okay. So why don't we find the word dinosaur in the Bible? Children may ask that. Why can't we find the word dinosaur? And again, this is used as marketing tool by the mass media around and the education system, which has the evolutionary worldview. They know kids love dinosaurs. And you pick up any dinosaur book, doesn't matter what book you get. I recently bought one to make sure I can pronounce the dinosaur names correctly. I'm having a bit of trouble. I didn't learn them, all the names as kids, but all the kids will be able to correct me after this talk on the correct pronunciation of dinosaurs, because it's everywhere. By the time they're 3 years old, they know how to pronounce dinosaurs better than they know how to pronounce, the names of their relatives. There's a fascination that's pumped out there by the media and the schools and the preschools as well, to impress upon children the existence of dinosaurs and the fact that they're at least 65 million years old. They're 65 million years old. And you see, the implication of that is, well, the Bible must be wrong. Can't be true. God didn't create Adam and everything didn't come into existence. 6,000 years ago, because science tells us, and science has proved, we've learned it from kids, that dinosaurs are at least 65 million years ago. So, simply, the whole generation in the world grows up very sceptical of the Bible, and that's a big problem. But here, this slide is illustrating why we don't find the word dinosaur in the Bible. And the problem is, the word dinosaur was invented in 1841 by Sir Richard Owen. Okay? But the King James Bible was translated into English in 1611. Okay? What we do have in the King James Version is over 30 references to the word dragon. Okay? It's there. And that's why we don't have the word dinosaur in the Bible. So as I said, the word dinosaur was first coined by this man, Sir Richard Owen, in 1841. And the Bible, the King James Version, has the word dragon. The Hebrew word is tan, that's the root word, and tannin or tanim. And it occurs 30 times in the Bible. In the King James Bible, it's translated as dragon 21 times. And here's a few definitions. Strong's Exhaustive Concordance says it's a marine or land monster, a dragon, a sea monster, or a serpent. Okay? Because when you look at how the word is used, and we'll look at this in our second study this afternoon, the word applies, tannin, to both land creatures and marine creatures. In the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament, the word tannin is explained as the word denotes any large reptile. And in an enhanced Strong's lexicon, dragon or a dinosaur. Pretty clear, isn't it? So we said before 1841, historians and scientists didn't use the word dinosaur. What did they use? Well, they used the word dragon. Here is one of the most famous history books in the world, from an ancient history point of view. It's called the Historia Animalium. Sorry, I can't pronounce that. Animalium. And it's a European scientific book of the 1500s. And this is what it has to say. You'll notice the context here. It's talking about the tortoise. It's talking about the weasel. It's talking about dogs. It's talking about storks. And it's explaining all their different characteristics. And here we have it. It says the dragon, when it eats fruit, swallows endive juice, and it's been seen in the act. So just like it tells us about the tortoise, okay, when it has partaken of a snake, or the weasel when it fights with a snake, or dogs when they suffer from worms, eat standing corn, and storks and other birds, when they get when they get a wound fighting, apply something to the injured spot, it talks about something they observed about the dragon, and that is that it eats fruit and swallows enzyme juice, and it's been seen. So this is an observation of a real animal that existed. Now here's another one, the Encyclopedia Britannica in 1768. Remember, dinosaurs, the word came along, 1841. Okay, and we have this entry here in this in the 1768 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica. I'll just enlarge that, of Draco. Now, Draco is the Latin word for dragon. And it goes on to say that the dragon is, in zoology, is a genus belonging to the older order of Amphibia reptilia, the characters of which are there. It has 4 legs, a cylindrical tail, two membranous wings, radiated like the wings of a bat and fish, by which he is enabled to fly, but not to any great distance at a time. And there are 2 species. Okay? They're talking about a real animal. This isn't mythology. Okay? This is something that existed that they saw. And here's an English dictionary, 1946. So we're moving forward. On the entry of the dragon, it simply says this: it's now rare. Okay? It existed in the past, but it's not so common today. They've gone extinct. We made the claim before that earlier paleontologists called dinosaurs dragons. And here's a book. Here's one such book. It's called The Book of the Great Sea Dragons, the ichthyosaurs and the plesiosauri. And he's quoting there the words that we read in Genesis, the Gedolom Tanim of Moses, the great sea monsters, the mighty dragons. Okay? And he was an esteemed paleontologist of his day. And he went round the world getting all the fossil evidence of these creatures. And he called them dragons. And he basically, his exposition was a whole sheet of plates that he'd found all over the world of the sea dragons, the plesiosaurs and the ichthyosaurs. And, you know, they're all called, you can see them, I've highlighted here in yellow, dragon, 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 dragon. That's what he named them. Here's a couple of examples from this one. And that's what he said was a dragon. And here's another one, a plesiosaurus. Okay, he calls it a dragon. And you can go today to the Thomas Hawkins, and his name was Thomas Hawkins, who wrote this book. You can go to the Natural History Museum in London and see them on display. Okay, so when he first found them, okay, back in the 1800s, early 1800s, he didn't call them dinosaurs. Okay? He started giving them the technical names of Plesiosaurus, but he commonly just referred to them, as he'd been brought up to refer to them, as dragons. Okay, why don't we see dragons today? Now, I've hinted at this already. The simple reason is that they've gone extinct. And here's a few examples of animals that we know have been hunted to extinction by man. The bigger the beast, the more ferocious the beast is, the more a problem it is, the loss of livestock and even human life, and so humans have to get rid of it. And this is the case with many animals that have gone to extinction. And so here's a few examples. You've got the quagga here, and it went extinct in 1870, a particular type of horse and with zebra type of stripes. A kangaroo that went extinct in the 1940s. And we could quote many more examples. In New Zealand, there's the giant moa bird that went extinct in the 1770s. And the dodo bird. You heard the expression, it's dead as a dodo bird? You know why they say that? It's because it's one of the first known animals that went extinct. It's no longer around. You can't find it anywhere. It's gone like a dodo bird. But the same is true of dinosaurs or dragons. And it's true, isn't it, that animals that are pests are almost always killed. like tigers in Singapore. If you go to Singapore, you'll see images of lions and tigers everywhere, but you can't find one alive. They've been hunted off. And why? Well, the tigers attacked the people working in the fields, rubber plantations, and along the country roads. And so what we have to ask, well, would dinosaurs or dragons been pests throughout history? And this is something we'll look at in potentially another study about the legends of dinosaurs. And here is one ancient record that dates to 1405, a chronicle of Burrs in Suffolk. And it says, close to the town of Burrs near Sudbury, there had lately appeared to the great hurt of the countryside a dragon, vast in body, with a crested head, teeth like a saw, and a tail extending to an enormous length, having slaughtered the shepherd of the flock, and it devoured many sheep. After an unsuccessful attempt by local archers to kill the beast due to its impenetrable hide, in order to destroy him, all the country people around were summoned. But when the dragon saw that he was able to be assailed with arrows, he fled into a marsh or mere, and there hid himself among the long reeds and was seen no more. And you'll find that a lot of the ancient diagrams and the drawings of dinosaurs are all about people killing dinosaurs. And we'll look at a few examples like that in a later study. Okay, so what we want to move on to now is the scientific evidence. And we'll also review quickly some archaeological evidence in this first study as well. And then in the second session this afternoon, we'll get on to the biblical evidence and particularly focus on the two creatures in the book of Job. And then for those who are interested, later on tonight, an informal study where we'll go through the historical evidence, the archaeological evidence, more archaeological evidence, and go through some dragon legends. Now, onto the scientific evidence. They're finding a lot of dinosaur bones today that are unfossilized. Okay, so many of the fossils that they're scraping out of the earth include real bones. They're not completely mineralized. In other words, they're not quite yet rock. And the title of this afternoon's talk is What Came Out of Hell Creek? And perhaps you had this in mind. I'm going to talk about something like this. Well, no. Hell Creek is actually a place in Montana in the USA. Okay, so here's the United States here, the western seaboard here, and you've got the state of Montana, and up in the corner here we have a place called Hell Creek. And paleontologists, this is a rich minefield for paleontologists. Remember we started with the the dinosaur that looks like a dragon? They found that in this same area as well. It came out of Hell Creek. So Hell Creek Formation is a very rich field where some of the leading experts on dinosaurs are making their studies every day. Now, what happened in 1993 in Hell Creek is that a monumentous discovery occurred that really threatened the whole theory of evolution. Scientists led by Mary Schweitzer unearthed the skeleton of a T-Rex in sandstone that was unfossilized. And listen to this. It contained organic molecules, including red blood cells. Now, how is that possible? If the dinosaur is 65 million years old, how can it still have organic molecules and red blood cells available for the scientists to see? Now, it wasn't just a small part of the bone. The entire skeleton was not fossilized, and it's now located in the Museum of the Rockies at Bozeman, Montana. And later in 2005, the same group of scientists found from another T-Rex discovery in Montana soft tissue, including flexible and elastic blood vessels and red blood cells. Here were the headlines. Scientists discover T-Rex soft tissue. Okay? And just zooming in on that a bit, this is what they found under the microscope after cleaning it up. Okay? They found tissue fragments from a Tyrannosaurus rex, are shown here, when it is flexible. And then look at this section here in photo C. That shows the regions of the bone showing fibrous character. Okay, it's still soft and flexible. Now, how can it be 65 million years old? Okay, now, I referred to this book before, which I bought to help my pronunciation of dinosaurs, but there's a section in the back here about some of the most significant finds of dinosaurs. And it says here, dinosaur discoveries, the great discoveries. And I looked for 1993, expecting to find this, but no, it's not here. Okay? Truly, this was one of the most monumental finds they've ever done in modern history about dinosaur bones. But basically, they're brushing over it. They're ignoring it. They're keeping it out of the textbooks because it doesn't fit with their worldview. These bones are claimed to be 65 million years old, but they managed to retain their structure. 65 million years old. Now, they say that man only arrived 3 to 4 million years ago. How is that possible? Soft tissue, unfossilized dinosaurs, organic molecules will not persist for more than a few thousand years. No more. And one of the leading paleontologists, whose name is in this book, by the way, he makes this comment that he says, that what they found is it's a fantastic specimen, but probably not unique. Other researchers might find similarly preserved soft tissues if they split open the bones in their collections. You see, the bias is preventing them from going any further than just assuming that it's 65 million years old. And here's what the particular paleontologist who found this said. It was totally shocking. I didn't believe it until we'd done it 17 times. It was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone. But of course, I couldn't believe it. I said to the lab technician, the bones, after all, are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? So that's what she said in 1994. And then she made further discoveries. Okay, and in the article of another evolutionary biased magazine, Smithsonian.com, the title of the article was Dinosaur Shocker. Probing a 68 million year old T-Rex, Mary Schweitzer stumbled upon astonishing signs of life that may radically change our view of the beast that once ruled the earth. And here's what she was quoted in saying in that article. If you take a blood sample and you stick it on the shelf, you have nothing recognizable in about a week. So why would there be anything left in dinosaurs? So the article goes on. It was big news indeed when Mary Schweitzer announced she had discovered blood vessels and structures that looked like the whole cells inside that T-Rex bone. The first observation of its kind. The finding amazed colleagues who never imagined that even a trace of still soft dinosaur tissue could survive. After all, as any textbook will tell you, when an animal dies, soft tissue such as blood vessels, muscle and skin decay and disappear over time, while hard tissues like bone may gradually acquire minerals from the environment and become fossils. Another magazine, Discover, Science for the Curious, and they labelled it Schweitzer's Dangerous Discovery. When this shy paleontologist found soft, fresh-looking tissue inside a T-Rex femur, she erased a line between the past and present. Then all hell broke loose, a play on the name of the place where they found it, Hell Creek. Now, how have the Darwinian scientists, the pro-evolutionary view, who believe that they're 65 million years old, adapted to this? Well, at first, the secular scientists tried to debunk Schweitzer's discovery, claiming that the dinosaur bones had recently been contaminated by some other sources. Something fresh must have been mixed up in them. However, further independent testing proved that there was no contamination. Mary Schweitzer's team answered all of the data challenges. And to make it even more difficult, there was no evidence of special preservation conditions. It wasn't like it was in ice, or it wasn't, somewhere sealed up in a tomb. The fossils were found in sandstone, which is very porous to fluids that will enter in and destroy organic matter. And then Mary Schweitzer's team went on to make a third important discovery in 2009. This time they found soft tissue preservation in a duck-billed dinosaur. And here's the headlines for this one. Apparent discovery of dino blood may finally prove the tissue preserves. Continuing the controversy over whether tissues can be extracted from fossils, cell-like structures resembling blood cells have been found in the leg bone of a dinosaur excavated from a Montana site. The researchers, led by Mary Schweitzer, have sequenced a set of proteins belonging to the 80-million-year-old remains of a duck-billed hadrosaur, confirmed the presence of collagen, we're talking about proteins here, laminin, and elastin proteins from the bone, and independently verified amino acids in dinosaur tissues. Well, the articles in this Discover magazine documents the unwillingness of many in the scientific community to believe her findings. They just can't believe it. It's against everything they've ever studied and ever lived for. Even to the point where Dr. Schweitzer was having a hard time trying to get her work published in scientific journals. She's not a creationist, okay? She doesn't believe in six-day creation. She believes that, evolution, what is the explanation for life. But this is what she's coming up with, and she's having a lot of trouble getting her work published. I had one reviewer tell me that he didn't care what the data said. He knew that what I was finding was impossible. I wrote back and said, well, what data would convince you? And he said, none. Smelly bones. Schweitzer recounts how after that first discovery, she noticed that a T-Rex skeleton from Hell Creek, Montana, had a distinctly cadaverous odour. And when she mentioned this to longtime paleontologist Jack Horner, he said, oh yeah, all Hell Creek bones smell. So ingrained is the notion among the paleontologists that dinosaur bones must be millions of years old that the smell of death doesn't even register with them when it's right under their noses. Okay, so there's the first discovery here occurred in 1993. Okay, we're now 2014. This has been going on for 20 years. Textbooks should be revised, but they're not. In 1993, okay, she first saw the bone blood cells, and it gave her goosebumps. In 1997, hemoglobin, red blood cells. 2003, evidence of the protein osteocalin. 2005, flexible ligaments and blood vessels. 2005 as well, medullary bone tissues, making it possible to identify the sex for the first time, because this was a pregnant female. And apparently when a female's pregnant, its bone tissues have something else in it. And they could identify, hey, what we've got here is a pregnant female. Then, 2007, collagen, which is an important structural bone. 2009, the fragile proteins elastin and lamin, and further confirmation of collagen in a duck-billed dinosaur. 2012, bone cells, osteocytes, the proteins actin and tubulin, and DNA as well. 2012, radiocarbon was reported, but carbon-14 decays so quickly that if the remains were even 100,000 years old, none should be detected. Okay, so really, they haven't been able to come up with a good answer. But if I bring this up now with someone who's in the scientific community, they will say, oh, we found the answer. Okay, it's iron. Okay, when an animal dies, iron is released in the body as it decays, and that acts like formaldehyde and is able to preserve the animal. And so this hit the headlines, I think in November, December last year. So finally, after 20 years, an official explanation, and this is the official explanation. Iron preserves ancient dinosaur soft tissues in fossils. So Mary Schweitzer, the same scientist who found all this, reports that the presence of hemoglobin, the iron-containing molecule that transports oxygen in red blood cells, may play a dual role in both preserving and concealing ancient proteins within fossils. So let's hear her out. So she says, when we die, the iron is turned loose on our tissues. And that destructive process can act in much the same way as formaldehyde does to preserve tissues and proteins. So that's the results of the study she did. That got headlines all over the world, and it's now viewed in the scientific community they have an answer. Well, do they have an answer? Do they really have an answer? Can iron act like formaldehyde and preserve soft tissue and blood cells for 67 million years? What Schweitzer did is a 2-year test, okay? And it was based upon a number of favourable non-real world conditions, including assuming constant room temperature, they made the test on ostrich blood vessels, and absolutely soaking it in this right artificially concentrated solution. So it's true that the presence of iron there, what they have proved, that it will work if the tissues are soaked in this solution for 2 years. That's what they proved. But how confident can we be that iron chelation will preserve tissues and keep it soft for millions of years, for 67 millions of years? And this is the problem. No scientist has ever observed the effects of millions of years on anything. Iron chelation may help explain short-term preservation, but nothing in the discovery demonstrates how long such preservation could apply for in the real world. And you see, rapid burial is the key. Preservation of these biomolecules requires more than the right mix of chemicals. Rapid burial is necessary in the first instance. The bones of the specimens that Schweitzer found, the T-Rex bone, the hadrosaur, they've been articulated. In other words, they weren't scattered everywhere. The bones were in place, all together. Okay? The animal was buried alive. And so everything's there. And so it's proving that rapid burial is the key to what happened. And so this rapid burial, obviously, we would explain by the Genesis flood. And on top of that, you could say, okay, iron may have helped preserve it a couple of thousand years at the most. Now, they're not willing. One thing to prove it for sure would be to do a carbon-14 test on the findings. Okay? And these two scientists won't let it happen. As I said before, if they run a carbon-14 test on it, then if there's any trace of carbon in it, it has to be younger than 100,000 years old. They won't allow that test to take place. But other paleontologists have confirmed carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. In 2005, here Otis Klein and his excavation team unearthed fossils from a Triceratops and a Hadrosaur. And both the Triceratops and the Hadrosaur bones still possess collagen, and the bones were tested for carbon-14, and the result of that official test was the average age of the Triceratops was 30,800 years old, and the Hadrosaur tested to be 23,000. Now, this still sounds a bit longer for our from our framework, if we're saying Genesis chapter 1, 6,000 years ago. But from the evolutionary mindset, to have a result that comes up conclusively, evidence of carbon, and well under 100,000 years, is a major paradigm shift for their thinking. Okay? So the mere presence of carbon-14 existing in not one but two dinosaurs utterly extinguishes in its entirety the evolutionary timelines that have been established. Now, that's not all, okay? There's more of these dinosaurs being found. National Geographic News reporting in October 11th, 2002, they found a mummified dinosaur in Montana, a mummified dinosaur. And the article describes it as the find of a lifetime. This is what it looks like, a bit green and, all sort of gawky. Okay? But that's what they found. 65 million years old? Come on. Here's an artistic drawing of what this duck-billed dinosaur originally looked like. So they talked about this mummified dinosaur as follows. His fossilized skeleton is covered in soft tissue, skin, scales, muscles, foot pads, and even his last meal is in his stomach. They called him Leonardo. Leonardo's stomach contents are so well preserved that researchers can tell what he had for his last supper. A salad of ferns, conifers, and magnolias. The stomach also contained the pollen of more than 40 different plants from the National Geographic. Another one was found in 2007. Dinosaur mummy found. Has intact skin and tissue. I'm just going close in. A newly found dino mummy has exquisitely preserved bones, skin, and possibly muscle and internal organs, scientists announce. Are you hearing about this in high school, kids? Are you hearing about this in your biology courses at university? You're not, are you? They're just ignoring it. It doesn't fit with their paradigm, with their worldview. And another one in 2012, a hadrosaur, a duck-billed dinosaur, they found the skin. In June 2012, in Alberta, Canada, they found this, and the University of Regina's physicist, Mauricio Barbai, said this: as we excavated the fossil, I thought that we were looking at a skin impression. Then I noticed a piece came off, and I realised that this is not ordinary, this is real skin. How does real skin preserve for 65 million years old? 65 million years. And we could go on. More evidence of young dinosaurs. Italy's first dinosaur was discovered with exceptional preservation of soft tissues. Dinosaur soft tissues were discovered in a rock nodule in Brazil. Soft tissues were discovered in a sauropod in central Montana. A theropod dinosaur from Argentina and a woolly mammoth have been shown evidence of containing probable blood vessels, cells, and connective tissues. And closer to home, blood vessels and proteins were found in the remains of a hadrosaur by researchers in Australia. Well, why don't they change their view? Why don't they admit they're wrong? That 65 million years old is wrong. It can't be. We've got soft tissues, we've got blood cells, we've got proteins, we've got DNA. Those things can't survive for 65 million years old. Well, you see, to them, they have a lot of faith. Okay? They have a lot of faith in the geological time column. And that's what it's all about with them. They're willing to call themselves ignorant in any area except one, and that's their geological time column. That's their basis for establishing that everything is 65, 100, 200 million years old, according to this geological time column. And that's just something that's invented by man. Okay? There's no logic for it. Nowhere in the world can this layer of rocks be found in this order. Even the Grand Canyon has 5 of the 10, only half, and not in the right order. 90% of all the rocks in the world have only 3 layers. Okay? So it's just their imagination. It's just their wild fancy that they put this together. But this is their faith, you see. And it's circular arguments. Okay, how do you know a dinosaur's 65 million years old? Because the fossil there was found in the layer that says 65 million years old. How do you know that particular layer is 65 million years old? We find these kind of dinosaurs there. See, it's circular. The whole logic is circular. And there's all sorts of problems, and I don't want to dwell too much on this because my purpose today is to present you with the overwhelming positive evidence that dinosaurs and man coexisted, rather than getting into this debate on their geological time column. I simply here want to point out they believe in this. This is their faith. Okay? There's no substance, there's no evidence for it. It's a religion with them. So, solid evidence that dinosaurs and man coexisted would shake the foundations of evolution by Dr. Philip Kitcher. Well, Dr. Philip, there's some pretty solid evidence out there. Let's move on to the second part of this talk. Archaeological and artefactual evidence. Starting with China, first of all, the Hongshan culture. Now, according to history, this culture existed BC 3000. That would make it before the flood. But there's various artefacts that they've come up with in their culture. And they're very famous for this C-shaped jade dragon of the Hongshan culture. There's a whole region in China where they've unearthed all these ornaments and pendants, and here's a few of them. You can see, a turtle and a wild boar. What about this one? What's this? We'll have a closer look at it. Here's another one. A Hongshan turquoise dragon. What's that look like? How about a Centrosaurus? Where did they get the idea from? Here's another one. They call this the Hongshan turquoise dragon. What does that look like? It looks like an adolescent Protoceratops. And here's the Hongshan jade dragon pendant. Looks like a small dinosaur again, doesn't it? Now, I should say, there's a good book I've got on this. It's called, where I got these diagrams from, it's called Untold Secrets of Planet Earth, Dire Dragons, by Vance Nelson. And to produce these images, and there's so much evidence in this book of archaeological evidence and cultural evidence in this book. What he's done to produce these images, he's got, first of all, an artist to draw, the dragon pendant. Okay? Just an artist who sketches it. So he didn't show him the original, he just showed him the artist's drawing on a piece of paper. Then they've gone along to some experts on dragons, maybe the movie makers who make Jurassic Park and things like that, and they've said, look, can you give us an image of this type of a dragon on this angle? And then they reproduced the dragons like that. So the final 3D imaging artist didn't see the original pendant. All they saw was a simple sketch of it. And that's how he came up with all the drawings in this book. But afterwards, by all means, have a look at this book. It's very interesting. So, where did they get the idea from? They obviously saw these animals as real creatures in their lives. Egypt, tombs. Okay, there's a famous what's called, in one of the pyramids they found what's called the Nama plate. I think named after one of the kings who was buried there. And what have you got drawn on this Nama plate, dated to 3000 BC? You see this? See these dinosaurs with long necks? And there's more of them. Okay? Maybe they're exaggerating them here, just for the purpose of artistry, but that's what you see. Okay, it looks like a big sauropod to me. Mesopotamia, the cylinder seal dated to 1520 BC. This is the actual seal. And when you roll it out, this is the image. Okay? You've got, again, sauropods. Maybe a Brachiosaurus or Argentinosaurus, I think is one of the biggest ones. And their necks are intertwined, aren't they? Okay, so they saw these animals as real 1,500 years before Christ. Babylon's Ishtar Gate. Okay, this is famous in a museum in Germany. There's all kinds of animals on the walls. But you'll also find this kind of animal as well, with a long neck and an interesting horn. Okay? And remember, not all dragons were large. Some of them were just the size of a cow, or even the size of a sheep. In Mexico, the Chupicuro culture, which lasted from 800 BC to 200 AD, they've got all these carvings of very interesting animals, clay figurines. Look at them all. Where did they get the idea to draw these from? And they found over 33,000 ceramic figures, many which included dinosaur figurines, and they found them in 1945, and they're identified with this culture that existed between 800 BC to 200 AD. Here's some more of them. Now here's one of them again. But the interesting thing from this culture, here is we go to China, the Tang Dynasty, 618 AD to 907 AD. Okay, so hundreds of years later, and separated by thousands of miles, two cultures that had nothing to do with each other are drawing almost the identical picture of a dragon. Now, how's that possible? And of course, this is a famous picture in China, isn't it? China's full of dragon culture and history. This was the figure of the dragon they used for the year 2012. Okay? We've just entered it. Does anyone know what this year is in the Chinese calendar? The year of the horse, that's right. Okay? Year before was the year of the snake. And the year before that, 2012, was the year of the dragon. So the question is, okay, with the Chinese calendar, the zodiac cycle, it consists of 12 animals, okay, as depicted here. And it first appeared in the Zhang period in the 5th century BC, 500 years before Christ. So the question we have to ask here, is this 11 real animals and one fictional animal, or 12 real animals? What makes the most sense? I think this was a turning point for me when I was considering this subject, because the evidence of this is overwhelming and it's staring at our faces in modern culture today, as we have so much to do with China now. 11 real and one fictional animal, or is it talking about 12 real animals? 2012 was the year of the black dragon. Let's come back to Peru. They have these Ica stones. They found 11,000 of them were found in 1930. They're burial stones. When people were buried, they buried them with these stones. And they had all sorts of descriptions of life and animals and daily activities were cleverly engraved on these stones. And all the tests conclusively show that they're of great age. Okay? They're at least 1,000 years old. So what have we got? What can you see here? Can anyone recognise what this may be? I can see this one looks like a Stegosaurus. And here we've got a long-necked dinosaur. Okay, here's another dragon here with someone actually maybe riding in the cartoon or the image that they've drawn, someone riding on the dragon. What kind of dinosaur does this look like? Perhaps a triceratops? What about this one? More, right? What about this one? Well, this was what happened to naughty boys back then. Right? The dragon, a T-Rex, is picking up a little boy. Okay, so that's amazing evidence there. Now, let's move on to an archaeological site, a famous temple in Cambodia. It's called the Ta Prohm. Okay, and it's dated till 1186 AD. And we just move in a bit closer, okay, and on the wall here, there's depictions of various animals. And we go in closer again, and what have we got? Looks fairly familiar, doesn't it? How did they know what that looked like? I mean, paleontologists didn't come along till the 1800s to get out of the rocks what all the dinosaurs looked like. How did they know back then what these dinosaurs looked like? Again, just showing the different animals that it's placed alongside of. It's a depiction of a stegosaur, isn't it? The ruins are dated 800 years old. How did the artisans know what a dinosaur looked like? Let's go over to England. The year is 1400 AD, and to a church where a certain person by the name of Richard Bell is buried. And his tomb is there, and along the edge of the tomb, it's got various brass engravings on the top of the tomb plate here. And along the edge, you can see there's various depictions of an eel, a fish, an eel, a dog, a bird, and what looks to be two brachiosauruses necking each other. So let's have a closer look again. So here's the picture of the church in ancient times. Here's his tomb. You can see the picture of the bird. Looks like to be the dog, the fish, and can't quite make out what that animal is at the moment. But moving on to the brachiosauruses, here they are. So here's the original one. Here's something enhanced vision. And it's showing us clearly, that in those days they saw animals that looked like this, that looked like dinosaurs, and they drew them. And notice their necking again. Where have we seen that before? Well, we saw it on the Nama plate in Egypt. We saw it on the Mesopotamia cylinder seal. And now we see it on Richard Bell's tomb. This is consistent. The way they're drawing it is consistent, describing the habitat of these animals. Friendly to each other must have been a common thing. I mean, we kiss, they necked. That's what they did. These animals did to show friendship to each other. And it's consistent. That's something paleontologists won't be able to tell you. Okay, the Aborigines have lots of stories. I think there's over 4 or 5 stories of creatures that appear to be dinosaurs. Let's just look at 2. Look at this. What does that look like to you? It's a plesiosaur. And they found this, the elders of the Kuku Yalanji Aboriginal tribe of far north Queensland, Australia, relate stories of the Yarra, or the Yarrabah, a creature which used to inhabit rainforest waterholes, and the painting above depicts a creature with features which look remarkably similar to a plesiosaur. Okay? And this animal is rare today. So why did Aborigines paint it? And not only that, they painted it with a snake, a turtle, a fish, and also something inside. They knew this animal. They knew the internal organs. Perhaps it had eaten one or 2 of them. And so they're ganging up on it to attack it and kill it. Okay? They had experience with this animal to know its intestinal tracts and its stomach. They knew what it looked like inside. They'd obviously caught it and cut it open. How about this one? Has everyone heard of the Bunyip? The Geelong Advertiser, Victoria, right? Reported in July 1845 about finding of unfossilised bone forming part of the knee of some form of gigantic animal. The paper reported showing it to an Aboriginal they regarded as particular and intelligent, and then he immediately identified it as a bunyip bone. And he drew this picture of what it looks like. And that was published in the newspaper, in the Geelong Advertiser. Now, of course, it's not perfect, but for his ability, it's not bad. Okay? It's a hadrosaur. Okay? It's the duck-billed dinosaur, the same one that Mary Schweitzer was finding in the US in Hell Creek. Okay? It's got this big duck bill about it. And you look at the one in the background and you can see that the bill on the front really extends out at the front as this Aborigine drew it. Okay? All right, so we'll bring our first study to a conclusion after having a look at all this evidence. We've looked at the scientific evidence that there's no way in the world that dinosaurs can be 65 million years old if they've got blood cells, soft tissue, proteins, DNA, amino acids, and they're finding them. There's just no way. We've looked at archaeological evidence all over the world in various places from China to Mexico, even here in Australia, Cambodia, pictures of dinosaurs from cultures and people who lived 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, with remarkable consistency about these creatures. So in our second study this afternoon, we want to go on to look at the biblical evidence. And then if there's further time for those who are willing to go for the long haul, we'll have a look at historical evidence, more archaeological evidence, and we'll look at a few dragons as to whether they're legends, dragon legends, and ascertain whether they're myth or fact. So thank you very much.